Hi, my name is Morgan and I am a neuroscience researcher. I am so sorry that I missed last week. If you live anywhere near America or you have ever heard of the United States of America, you will understand why I needed to take a small mental health break. But I'm back and I'm feeling good about how everything went, and I am excited to start recording videos again. I'm also extremely excited because this is my first video that was requested by someone. So thank you so much to Madison for requesting this video. I am excited to answer your questions, and this is a great time to remind everyone else that if you would like to ask a question about brains, about mental health, mental illness, or just about science and research in general, you can email them to askaneuroresearcher@gmail.com, or you can just leave a comment below this video. So Madison asked me to talk a little bit about why journals cost so much and why there's a paywall to research and what the issues potentially are with it, or what's good about it. Just sort of why is research so expensive to read? Research is insanely expensive to conduct. The equipment that we use costs a lot of money. The different primers and proteins and whatever you need to conduct your research typically costs an insane amount of money. But why do papers cost money? If you've ever had to research something for a class, you've likely run into a paywall where you come across a journal article and you think, oh yes, the study is perfect for this paper that I'm writing, and then it maybe gives you an abstract and then asks you to pay money to see the rest. This isn't typically an issue that researchers run into a lot. This is more an issue that students or teachers or just sort of the general public runs into a lot. Scientists are typically associated with a university, and universities typically pay a subscription to different journals. So how much does a journal subscription cost? Journals are very secretive about how much they charge, and I tried to look it up, and a lot of universities are forced to sign non-disclosure agreements about how much money they pay to this journal. So I'm not saying that journals do this, but if they wanted to, they could charge different universities different amounts. But a typical journal subscription runs anywhere between hundreds of dollars to thousands of dollars to like $50,000. It's just ridiculous. And these universities will pay a subscription to a journal for its students. So typically, if you go to a university or a college of some sort, if you go to the library, you will have access to these journals and you will be able to read any articles that are published in the journals. And this really helps students sort of keep up to date with what the current research is. It helps the researchers associated with that university stay up to date. So this is all great that universities are willing to do this for their students. Journals also, though, use this as an excuse to charge more money, because by their logic, they're saying that instead of a subscription being for one person, the subscription is potentially for an entire university, so they can charge whatever they want. There's also an issue with journals having sort of a monopoly over research. Because of the way that academic research works, you aren't allowed to publish the same research in multiple journals. So whatever journal ends up publishing your work has exclusive access to your research. So if you find a study that you would really like to read, you're only going to be able to find that in one place, and either you pay the subscription for it, or you pay the fee to look at that one article, or you don't get to read the article. Something that I thought was sort of like interesting whenever I was researching this is that I thought that journals had to like pay people to do different things. Like the cost of accessing a journal was because of like the cost of producing everything, and that's true to an extent. Like they pay their publishers, and they pay, I'm sure they have like faculty that work there, and I'm sure they have editors and things like that who get paid, but they don't pay their researchers. So whenever you submit a paper to be published, you also have to pay a processing fee, and you have to pay a publishing fee, and all sorts of fees that can add up to thousands of dollars just to get your research published. And then that research is then sent to a peer reviewer, or several different peer reviewers, who will make sure that your research is credible, so we're not just publishing whatever comes across the desk. And those peer reviewers don't get paid either. So no one who's actually involved in the research that they're putting out is being paid by these journals. I read somewhere that really high impact journals make a crazy profit margin of like 20 to 30%, but that's still not fully known because they are so secretive about how much they charge people. So we can't know for sure how much they're making. But why should we care about all of this if you're a student at a university, or like me, I'm a researcher, and we get these articles for free through the library? So why do we care that it costs so much? And the issue is that this really hurts public literacy. I'm sure all of us who are scientifically minded have run into an issue where we're arguing with someone, or someone brings up some ridiculous study that they've read that just is totally not credible and you should not believe. But it was published somewhere where those people were able to read it. But if you're not able to read credible research, you're not able to get your hands on the current research and what is happening right now in the field, how are you going to know what's credible, what's not credible, what good research looks like, what versus bad research? You just know what you have access to. And so by having all of these articles behind a paywall, we're keeping the general public out of the know. And this also leads to a mistrust of science, because why would we hide what we know? Why would we hide all of our knowledge to where the general public can't find it if it's not something bad? If it's stuff that's going to help society, why would we not let society read it? So one way that some scientists are sort of fighting back against these paywalls is by creating open access journals. And I will link some open access journals that I like and approve of in the description. But basically an open access journal is one that can be accessed by the general public. It can be accessed by whoever wants to access it. And so the general public can read these papers, they can stay informed, and they don't have to go behind a paywall to do so. Open access journals typically make their money by charging researchers, so the researchers still have to pay to publish their research most of the time. And they also get funding from different funding agencies, because a lot of funding agencies, at least in the US, are funded by the government, which therefore means that they're funded by taxpayers. And so these funding agencies are pretty big fans of open access journals, because if the taxpayers are paying for this research, they should also be able to read the research and see what their money is going towards. This is still an issue that hasn't been entirely solved. Some people do have issues with open access journals. I think the most reasonable one that I've seen is that open access journals typically aren't high impact journals. All scientific journals are assigned an impact factor based on how often their research is cited and how many times their research is cited. So if you get your publication into a really big high impact journal, you're likely to be cited more times, which then makes your research a bigger deal because more people have seen it and more people have cited it, more people have taken what you've done and done something with it. So being published in a high impact journal is really important for your career, and it's really important for your whole field that more people are able to get their eyes on this research. It can also be important as far as getting hired. Whenever you get out of your PhD and you go on to apply for faculty positions, if you have been published in a high impact journal, you tend to be more likely to get the position because your research is sort of seen as more important. You're also more likely to get more funding if you get published in high impact journals because, again, your research is seen as more important because more people care about it. The issue with this mindset is that a lot of people who support open access journals think that it's more of a correlation situation. If you believe that the more important research gets published in higher impact journals that are behind paywalls, then you're more likely to submit the more important research to the journals with paywalls. So if more people used open access journals, then open access journals might become higher impact. People who support open access journals also argue that if more researchers publish in open access journals, more people would see their research. Maybe your research wouldn't be seen by super big name scientists, but the general public would have access to your research and could actually stay up to date on your field. You might have to argue less with people about what's going on in your field. More like high school teachers could get a hold of it and educate their class better. So publishing in these open access journals could really increase public literacy on your field. Adding on to that general public literacy, something that I had never even considered is that the scientific media can really only report on what they have access to. Now, I don't fully understand how scientific media works, or pop science, or whatever you want to call it, I don't fully understand how they have access to journals, if they have to pay per article, exactly what the situation is there. But if they can't access your work, they can't cite it and they can't do a report on it. So if you publish open access, they would have no problems getting a hold of it. And then the popular science media could publish more articles relating to what is real and what is current and what is relevant to your field, instead of just publishing what they have access to. And all of this staying relevant is really important in science. I think a lot of people are kind of learning now that science, we report what we know and what we find, but that can change. It can change for like several reasons. First of all, our understanding of a concept might change how we interpret our results. Someone could publish something contradictory to your research, and then you sort of have to both work out who was wrong and why they were wrong. There's a lot of different reasons why our current understanding of something may change. And so being able to stay up to date is very important. Another issue with the high cost of journal subscriptions is that a lot of smaller universities can't afford them. So people who attend smaller universities are also sort of kept out of the loop and aren't able to stay up to date on the current research, which also creates sort of this vicious cycle of people at smaller universities also tend to not get as much funding. And that could be because they're not able to publish in high-impact journals, because then they don't have access to the high-impact journals. So how are they supposed to publish stuff on par with what everyone else is publishing? That's also extremely frustrating as a scientist, because science is very largely based on the sharing of knowledge. You want to know what other scientists have done that worked and what other scientists have done that didn't work. And you want to be able to replicate studies. You want to understand their methods. You want to stay up to date. And scientists are meant to work together, but things don't always work out like that. But it's upsetting that a paywall could be the reason why we don't work together and why we don't all collaborate. So like I've said a couple of times, most universities will pay this subscription so that their students can access it. So why should you, if you're a university student, why should you care? If you have access to everything right now, you can write your papers, you can write your reports, no problem. Well, someday you're going to get out into the field. And luckily for me, my field is academia, and so I'm going to stay at colleges who will be paying the subscription for me. But other people might go into industry, and in industry, I'm not sure how it works, but I assume they don't pay subscriptions to every single journal. You might become a medical doctor. I doubt that hospitals have subscriptions to all of these journals. You might become a vet. Doubt that veterinary clinics have access to all of these journals. You might go on to different like professional degrees in different professions, and you'll want to be able to stay up to date on the latest research in your field, but you won't be able to because of this paywall. So it's important also to people who have graduated from college. A really interesting argument that I found also was that if we made these journals more available to people, we might be able to increase scientific literacy from a younger age. Something that I've read a lot is that your high school and college textbooks are typically about 5 to 10 years behind what the current knowledge is. And if you think about it, that's really frustrating, because why are you learning it if it's not relevant anymore? Why would you be taught that instead of what is current? And part of the issue is that your teacher isn't up to date, because how in the world could they be up to date if they'd have to pay $1,000 subscription to a journal to know what's happening in a single particular field? So if they had more access to journals, maybe even high school teachers could teach scientific literacy. They could teach how to find a credible journal and how to find a reputable journal, and they could also teach the most up-to-date information that we have instead of stuff that's way behind and going to be irrelevant by the time you graduate. So to sort of summarize, there's a lot of issues with the paywalls to academic journals and to sort of the secrecy of knowledge that they create. It creates a lot of mistrust from the public. It creates a deficiency in scientific literacy, and it just creates more problems than I think it solves. Because honestly, I don't know what it solves. I tried really hard to find like a justification for how much it costs. And like I said, there are studies showing that they make probably a 20 to 30% profit margin, which is more than Apple makes. And so I don't want to say it's a scam, because it is important to have access to these journals, and it's important that the peer review process stays intact, because the peer review process does help us sort through what is credible research and what is not credible research. But I can't justify how much these journals cost, and that it's that ridiculous of an amount for a subscription to one journal. So in case you're not familiar with scientific research, you don't ever just read one journal. Not all of the information that you could possibly need is in one journal. And so you're going to need a subscription to at least 5. I don't know, that's pulling a number out of thin air. You need a subscription to all of them, because something might get published in a really obscure journal that you don't know about, but it was really good research and it's really relevant to what you're trying to do. And so you really need access to all of these. And it's ridiculous that you have to pay so much to have access to one. It's also ridiculous. I always thought that part of the price went towards paying the peer reviewers, because you do need, I think the standard is 3, maybe 4 peer reviewers per paper. And so I figured, like, yeah, you probably have to pay them to like review a paper, but they don't. So where is all of that money going? And why do we have to be so secretive with our research? I fully believe that the majority of scientists have the public's best interest in mind. I think that most of us do this research to increase general knowledge, and I think that most of us do it to help humanity. And so it's not like anyone's out there doing really awful research trying to hide it from the general public. We want people to know what we found, so I don't see why we have to hide it behind a paywall. So to conclude this like kind of sad video, support open access journals. I think a lot of them accept donations if you have the money to donate. If you are a researcher, you could submit your papers to open access journals to help them get more credibility. Do what you can to support an increase in public knowledge. Like I said at the beginning of this video, this was my first one that was requested by someone. So again, if you would like to request a video, leave a comment down below or email me at askaneuroresearcher@gmail.com. You can also find me on social media at all of these places. And I hope you come back next Wednesday for my next video. Bye.